Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here today and chit chat with all of you about one of the my most favorite moments of international cricket. It was not even 3 months ago, on the 8th of March, that there was a grand, huge match, the final of the Women's 2020 World Cup, which was witnessed by almost 90,000 people live on ground at the MCG. The scary part is that had it been 5 days later, the same match would have been behind closed doors. So today we're going to chat about that iconic match, what it meant for women's cricket, what it meant for cricket, and of course, COVID, its entry, and how it's just shuffled things around, good, bad, etc. First, before we go further and before I introduce my guests to you, let's just live through that in a nutshell, just a 1 minute clip, just to refresh our memories and be on the same page.
International Women's Day, and I never thought I'd see a day quite like this.
Here in Australia, since 2016, we've spoken about this moment, this day, a life-changing moment in women's sport in this country and potentially globally.
Australia!
Truly, I believe that women's cricket has come into the mainstream now.
This moment is the glorious moment for me.
I think that 22 women here today absolutely deserve this day. They're supreme athletes. They deserve to be here.
This is a moment where you're going to look back and go, I was part of a movement.
Crowds have been piling in, and we expect close to capacity here today for this momentous occasion. International Women's Day, and the women take centre stage.
86,174 people. Okay, let me introduce you to my guests now. All three of them were actually there on the match, on the day of the match. The first one is Melanie Jones. She's a former cricketer herself. She's a very well-known commentator across all genres, men and women, recipient of the Medal of Order of Australia on the Victorian Honour Roll for Women, a part of Cricket Australia. MJ, such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Welcome aboard.
Look, I was surprised that you asked me along being an Australian and still probably gloating a little bit over the final. But first and foremost, I know here in Australia things have eased a little bit in COVID, but we were chatting off screen about everything that's going on in India at the moment. So, so certainly my thoughts and well wishes going out to everyone in Bombay with cyclones and locusts and COVID as well. But thank you so much for the chance to relive a magical day.
You know, absolutely. And MJ, just a quick recap. So much water under the bridge since we last met. And like we were discussing offline earlier, the last time we attended a Women's World Cup, albeit it was a 50-over one when we were together, there were barely 5 people in the stands. From that to almost 90,000, what an incredible journey. And how would you sum it up for me? Just that adrenaline, the excitement, and yes, those old photos, of course.
Yeah, I know. You didn't tell me to bring those out. Look, it's been a journey, hasn't it? So that's an 11-year gap. And to me, what it says was when I walked onto the MCG just before the game and looked around at the crowd, and I'm not an overly emotional person, but, there's a tear in the eye because it's the players on the ground, that's what it's all about, but it's the amount of people that have put in so much time and effort that probably don't have the platform or get the recognition, on television and the likes. And so it's just an opportunity, I think, a massive shout out to everyone that's been involved in the game, that believed in the game, because there's quite a few, as what our Australians would say, knockers, or those that didn't believe. So it's so nice that everyone came together for a moment like that.
Amazing. And I just really wish I'd been there, but well, it wasn't to be. However, Harini was there, and she's our next guest on the show. Harini, Rana, she and I worked together at times now, many, many moons ago, and we had one common four-ish kind of character. I won't go further than that. Hi, Harini.
Hi, Mel. Lovely to see you.
Hi,
the last person I met before going into lockdown was Mel.
There you go.
For a war in Australia. Yeah, that was the last time that I actually stepped out. After that, I've gone onto a flight and back home, completely in lockdown.
That's amazing. And Harini, just really quickly, you were there on this iconic day. You've been so closely associated with sport in India. You're such a strong woman in sports as far as that definition goes. Tell me a little bit about your experience on the day.
So I think, Mandira, what comes to my mind is if you're drawing a straight out comparison, I know there should be no comparisons, but 2015 World Cup final, Australia was in the World Cup final. That's the men's World Cup final. I would compare it straight to the 2020 World Cup final or the women's. And trust me, the kind of energy, the kind of buzz, it was unmatchable, unparalleled. I've covered Cricket World Cup that happened in Mumbai, but what we saw in MCG was completely different. And just the whole surround sound that was created around this event, and I don't know if it would have been same if any other hosting country was doing this. I think a lot of credit due to the local organizing committee and Cricket Australia and Australia government to sort of come together and give it a surround sound or fill the MCG or do the kind of campaigns that they've done. And the kind of people, Melanie and Ayaz would agree with me while they were at the ground, the kind of people who were coming in from different parts of Australia, all they were there is for this historic moment. They didn't care who would win or who was playing, but it was more about being there for such a historic moment to support women's cricket.
So true. And Australia really is the leader in that. Let me bring Ayaz on board, who was also there on that day. Ayaz Memon, who is in Alibag. So we're firstly praying for your safety and yours, Harini, because this dreaded cyclone, which is supposed to hit Alibag first. So please stay safe. But just rewinding to that day, Ayaz, who would have thought that would be the swan song for now of cricket as we knew it, or or an event of that stature and that caliber on that kind of a grand stage? Who would have known?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was the last big fixture that we've had in international cricket. We had a one-day match between Australia and New Zealand subsequently after the Women's World Cup final, but it was played to a television audience only. There were no spectators at the ground. So my own experience of that match is unforgettable. I was overwhelmed. I never anticipated that we would get such a crowd. And not just the number of people, but the involvement, the engagement of the people who were there as spectators. It was exhilarating, to say the least. The match could have been a little better for India. Obviously, it was terrific for Australia. I think perhaps, and not making excuses for the disappointing performance of the Indian girls, perhaps they were also a little overwhelmed. But having said that, one must give credit where it's due. I think from the time they took the field, the Australian women looked to be a team apart. But for me, the experience of being there, one of the great things that we've learned, and that's essentially come from Australia over the last 40, 50 years, is how to, give any match or any series or a tournament the right kind of pitch to get people engaged, whether it's in the Kerry Packer era or the World Championship of Cricket. It just takes it to another level in terms of engagement, and that's what we saw in this match too.
So true. There was such an enormous build-up, and I remember reading that Meg Lanning, who's the captain, of course, she'd also said that when they said that they'd fill up the stadium, she said I was a bit skeptical. But then, of course, Tourism Australia and the Cricket Australia left no stone unturned, which begs the question that Harini kind of raised, saying that was the success of the Women's World Cup final the way it was because it was in Australia? How dependent was it on being in Australia? Would we have seen something similar in India or in England? What are your thoughts? All of you. It's a conversation. So, everybody jump in where you want. We're having a chit chat, had it in the evening, it would have been with drinks, but now coffee or water or that for you, Mel.
I think we can give a little bit of credit to England and the ECB from the previous 50-over World Cup in 2017, because you sell out Lords, you have that magnificent final. So there was some hype sort of building in and around that stage. And I think what Cricket Australia did exceptionally well was the build-up of the Women's Big Bash. And so there was this engagement and connection from Australian fans with the Australian players. And they started to get used to coming down and watching and supporting and cheering on the way in which the women play the game. So there was that build-up as well. And I know when the ICC pitched to Cricket Australia about making it a separate standalone, the two World Cups, there was some raised eyebrows. And then when they said, what about the final? Where are we going to put it? We'll put it in a little boutique ground like the Big Bash has been used to. And the comment was, and Belinda Clark, who was with us in 2009 with the team, she was in this meeting, and the thought was basically, if not us, who? And if not now, when? And they said, if we really believe in this product, let's go, let's give it all. And yes, it might have fallen short a little bit by that world record, but I think that just pales into insignificance about all the wins around the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, Ayaz?
Well, look, I think the two countries which could have given this kind of engagement, Australia, certainly we've seen it. There's evidence of it. The other is not taking anything away from England, as Mel mentioned. We've had the World Cup there, the 50-over World Cup. But in terms of passionate involvement, I think India would have responded equally well, and especially if the Indian girls were also in the final. I think that perhaps there's a lesson for India, especially, which aims to be or is the bastion of the sport now, in terms of, in the number of fans and the money power that it has, the kind of reach that it can afford, and etc. etc. I think there are lessons to be learned from Australia. Not that we haven't learned over the years. We learned to play night cricket and play in colored clothing, but in terms of really giving it that elevation, raising it to an experience that remains unforgettable. That's something that we should kind of cherish, and we have to learn from. And I think that's something that the BCCI and all those who manage affairs, not just in women's cricket, but also in otherwise in the men's section also, they need to perhaps take a leaf or two out of the Australia playbook, Cricket Australia playbook on this.
Absolutely. If you see these photos also, they're fans. They're fans of women's cricket. It's not a peripheral tournament that's been shoved along with the men's tournament, and whoever's gone to see the men's tournament has kind of also drifted across. These are people who have come to see women play cricket, and I think that is a huge achievement, definitely for this generation, and well done to all the girls. What about the players, MJ? I mean, I'm sure you're in touch with them constantly. Now that thankfully the match happened when it did, 5 days later it would have been closed door. That would have been frightening. So much effort and everything would have just come to naught. But now, as far as the players are concerned, what is their mindset like? Is there trepidation? Is there fear? What's going on? Just bring us up to speed with the on-ground reality.
Yeah, look, I think they're still a little bit on a high because they're just sitting home watching reruns of it. No, they're not. Rana actually lives in the apartment block next door to me, so she was the one there with the trophy in that fantastic photo with the Katy Perry boots. So she probably led the celebrations for quite some time. So it's going on a little bit. I think most of the players now, though, are trying to embrace the positivity in and around COVID and giving themselves that time to reflect on this win. Ash Gardner herself, she's gone into Indigenous painting, and that's, as I point the wrong side of over my shoulder there. So she's doing some Indigenous painting. So I got her to do a painting that represented the Women's World Cup final. So Indigenous art is all about dots, and you can't quite see that there, but the white is just thousands and thousands of dots, which is the 86,174 people. The middle part is in purple, which is International Women's Day colour, is the MCG with the female symbol. And the yellow and blue dots have little dots in the middle of it all, representing all the players that have played for India and Australia up until that final as well. So players are finding their own unique ways to, number one, keep fit and active, engaged, but just, I suppose, expand on their own skill sets a little bit and not get too bored.
That is so cool. I love the painting and the explanation of it. I think it's fantastic. And I think women also are, sorry, Ayaz, but generally women are able to adapt a little bit.
Multitaskers.
Of course, natural multitaskers.
Natural all-rounders.
You've obviously been trained really well.
It's, choice. We are choiceless in the matter.
But going back to our conversation, and like we were discussing, it's taken so much to get there. It's taken so much time, effort, money, intention, all the boards coming together, the ICC support, etc., etc. What is it going to take to sustain it? I think it would have been a bit of a challenge or a bit of a talking point had things been normal in any case. But now with COVID and its onslaught, how do we sustain that interest, that excitement? Men's cricket, good or bad or whatever, point is that they've had a longer legacy or this fan engagement or all this, the boys club, etc. So that kind of just gets carried on those shoulders. Plus financially, they are far more secure than the women players are. So what is it going to take to sustain this excitement, this hype, this investment of fans?
So can I jump in here, Mandira?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So look, I'll very briefly, just to kind of give you the trajectory of Indian women's cricket as I've seen it in the last 40 years. The first women cricketers I got introduced to were Shanta Rangaswamy, Diana Idalji, Fauzia Khalili, that generation. And they really struggled. They really struggled. There would be four to a room. They would fend for themselves, travel, Janta class in trains, and because they had no support, they were left to raise their own money to play tournaments. If they had to travel overseas, they had to raise their own money, etc., etc. Things started changing after BCCI incorporated women's cricket also into it, and therefore they got the support of the establishment, so to speak. Earlier there was only the women's cricket establishment, which didn't have any heft, didn't have any muscle. So that's been the big jump, the quantum jump. After that, if the establishment is behind you, then you get tournaments, matches to play, you get more financial security, which has happened, and then the propagation of the game. Now, I think somewhere the propagation of the game needs to be, given more power. Women's cricket, more opportunities to play, more tournaments, more live telecasts, etc., etc., and certainly, as far as possible and as quickly as possible, wage parity. One of the people I met, one of the people I met, and I was so fortunate to meet her in Melbourne, was Billie Jean King. We were staying in the same hotel.
Wow.
And we met at breakfast, and it's one of the greatest moments of my life. But, she posed for a picture, had a conversation with me. But the first thing she asked me after that is, are the women cricketers being paid as much as the men? So I said, no, certainly not. But, it's been a big improvement since the game started. She says, big improvement is relative, because big improvement can take 20 years to reach parity, or if things are done well, aggressively, then it can take 2 years, maybe a year. So, it's very profound, the way she said it. And how women's cricket is going to evolve, and certainly in India, where the audience is there, is how well the BCCI responds to the environment and sees the opportunities as well. I think where women's cricketers, those who are involved in the administration there, where the women is concerned, how they negotiate with the BCCI and also with their own players. They have to grow their pool of players. Right now, the pool in India is still very limited compared to the men's section, because the domestic structure is very weak. So that needs to be improved. It needs to be made more robust, etc., etc. And then I think you'll get a lot more, power in women's cricket that will come through from India.
And depth. And this is also, of course, the BCCI, which is the richest board. And we're talking about the main cricket playing nations right now, right? We're saying the BCCI, we're saying Australia, we're saying England, and that's still the scene is good. I'm just putting it very colloquially. But the thing is that unless and until this permeates through every single cricket playing nation, this kind of culture, this kind of encouragement. And right now with COVID, I was reading a few articles, and the scary, like you said, Ayaz, it's so important for the establishment to back it. It's so important for there to be more tournaments, more play generated for the women players, and that encouragement to say that it's not your side job. This is your career, and we're supporting you, right? With COVID, etc., while the richer boards are still going to be able to sustain the salaries or the contract money for all the players, men or women, etc., is there a danger in some cases for the ability for the boards to sustain men's cricket, for them to sacrifice women's cricket? Do you think there's a danger of that? Any of you?
Mel, you want to go for it first, and then we go for it.
You go. I'll just ride on your coattail.
So I just think, Mandira, it's a challenge in terms of challenge and an opportunity for the leadership. See, pre-COVID, everyone's lot of sort of statements have come through where there's equal support for women's cricket, even from the governing body. So I think it's somewhere a challenge for the leadership to prove and stand by the statements or the long-term plans that they've had, then be it all your mainstream cricket boards or be it even the governing body of the ICC, while they've said there's going to be equal amount of tournaments going into up to 2023. So that's going to be a challenge and an opportunity for the leadership to stand by this whole belief that they have. Obviously, the 2017 World Cup gave them a belief that it's worth investing into women's cricket, because that's when everybody saw the potential. And 2020, what we saw in Australia was just a glimpse of the potential that Australia and women's cricket has. So I think it's going to be challenging for the leadership to put in that investment. And also the other point that we were discussing in terms of how Ayaz mentioned about how Australia elevated this event, and it was good for India to learn as well. Just the whole, when you, I would give you an example of the branding and stuff like that was done in Australia. So when you land at the airport, you were literally being plastered and bombarded with everything about Women's World Cup. So all of those things, there were cross-functional entities who were working together. Like when I went for the World Cup, there was a global business summit that was organized by Global Victoria, which was for women in sport. That's where Billie Jean King was actually attending it, and they had a lot of people, including Mel, was also present for that. So all of those things came together, which were cross-functional units, all contributing towards one single cause, which was fill the MCG and create that buzz around that event that was happening on 8th of March.
I think the other thing too is that if it's coming from the top down in terms of your national boards, you've got to have it in writing. Like, you can't just say we support women's cricket, but if it's all of a sudden, if you've got a strategic plan and a vision in place that's embedded within your organisation, then you've got something to fall back on all the time in terms of making your decisions, and that comes back to your own, I guess, set of values as an organisation as well. But if all of a sudden you say, we support women's cricket, but you haven't actually got anything there to refer to constantly, it then becomes a lot easier for things just to drop off. So I know from Cricket Australia's point of view, we're now looking at the next 10 years of women's cricket. There was a strategic plan almost a dozen years ago now, if I get my timings right, that's led up to this moment now. But again, rather than not wanting to rest on the laurels, getting all the key people in the room, and a lot of those key people are probably some people that you still got to try and win over a little bit. From grassroots all the way through to the national team. Let's get everyone in the room that's got an investment in the game, got an opinion, got some thoughts on the game, and let's set a clear path of where we actually want the game to be in 10 years' time. Now, it might not follow that exact path all the way there. It might take a little different turn here and there, but ideally you've got that vision in play and everyone can consistently refer to it, so that if something like a COVID comes along, this is still in play. Yes, you might not have all the funds or all the resources, but it is still a core part of your strategic vision for the national body.
Absolutely right, and it's the vision that's important, and everybody has to be aligned, in that. And Australia, I think, has mastered that. To be honest with you, I'm not sure of how much politics is at play at Cricket Australia, and I'm not sure that you can even chat about it very openly. But it's
right now, I mean, Cricket Australia has done extremely well in the way they've engaged fans and what they've done for the sport. Apart from some, the biggest problem seems to be right now of liquidity in terms of finances, and the investments kind of blowing up in their faces. This is what one has read. We won't put Mel under the hammer for that. But where women's cricket is concerned in the post-COVID area, and I can tell you about this from the Indian point of view. I don't know about Australia and South Africa or England, etc. So, in any case, there weren't too many engagements. There are not too many tournaments. So, in that sense, it should be managed. Now, the challenge is, whatever exists, don't disrupt that. Maybe you have to tide over the problem for maybe 8, 10, 12 months and things will start being normal. But don't use COVID-19 as an excuse to diminish the engagements of the Indian women's team or women players. Keep that going. And then, of course, when things start coming back to normal, and you can afford it, then you expand. So what Mel says is absolutely right. There is a need to take a medium to long-term view and start strategic planning for that, irrespective of COVID.
Absolutely.
COVID is something that nobody anticipated, nobody had a clue, and frankly, we don't know what the next 3 months hold for us.
Yeah, and this is like,
we have to account for that, and then let's take it from there.
And there's the whole thing, that whole cliche of safety numbers or company in misery. We're all in the exact same boat, right? I mean, if everybody's locked down, everybody's suffering some kind of a financial setback or the other. I mean, mostly, everybody's in the exact same boat. So in that, I think
the point I'm trying to make is, if there is such a demand for India versus Australia, the full series to happen or the IPL to happen, even if it means shifting the T20 World Cup to another year, which the ICC might announce on June 10th. If that's the case, for the men's section, for Indian men's team and the Australian men's team and so on and so forth, it should be also concurrently that we have the women's team and Australian women's team playing matches. Why not?
Yes, absolutely.
Because those engagements can't be shelved. You have to accommodate them.
ask you next was this, that, as far as the men's cricket is concerned, and even Steve Smith said that, okay, fine, if the 2020 World Cup is postponed, we're all for coming out and playing the IPL. But what's next for women's cricket? What are the options right now for the women cricketers? The men have the IPL to look forward to if it goes ahead. So what do you think is going to happen for the women?
I think in a lot of ways it'll be the extension of what the men's have already set up. So the Big Bash in Australia started almost 10 years ago, so 7 years ago. And then the Women's Big Bash came into play. The IPL started previous to the Big Bash, and now we've just started to see some exhibition games in the last couple of years. It's not branded as the IPL, as it's got the launching pad to then expand once teams are in that right space, and the BCCI deems it so. And then we see in England, it's gone from the Super League, which was the T20 format over there, and a standalone platform, coming into the 100 now. Unfortunately, this year, the 100's been postponed to next year. Yeah. So you've got those three will probably be the three major T20 franchise tournaments going on around the world for women's cricket. So we just need to make sure that we give clear windows so that any players in national bodies, in national teams, those teams aren't playing each other during this time. So we need to be brave enough to say, let's give an opportunity for those competitions to expand, because that gives a money earning capacity for players to play overseas outside of their own country, and really elevate that, because that's also where you're going to get fan engagement, you're going to get broadcast, you're going to get profile improvement, and you're going to get buy-in from individual countries as well. And then around that, we can obviously also promote the ICC World Cups in the 50 over and the T20 and the Championship as well. So there's a few things at play there that we've just got to try and balance out as much as possible.
Yes, right. And you were talking about England and the 100s tournament and all of that. With its postponement, at least in England, there has been a certain sense of insecurity. For example, I was reading some articles where a couple of players said, we'll have to work in the grocery store. We'll have to, because the English Cricket Board, while it's paying out a certain amount, it can't pay out enough to sustain them as full-time, on full-time employee. And that is a challenge, definitely. Maybe not in Australia, and certainly not in India. I mean, they've got enough money. But that is a challenge that women cricketers will have to see, I feel. What do you think?
So, I mean, Mandira, I think that, frankly, in the food chain of cricketers across the world, the three most secure boards are actually India, England, and Australia till very recently. They've had a financial crisis now. But in terms of the money, in terms of the finances, and hopefully Australia will recover fast enough. But the other boards are actually impoverished. So whether it's the women cricketers or the men, there's an issue. South African men's team, the Sri Lankan, the Bangladesh, Pakistan, West Indies, all of them actually are struggling. So there needs to be a well thought out, holistic strategy that the ICC comes up with the collaboration of all the boards. And I think this is where some wider, broad thinking by the BCCI, ECB, and Cricket Australia will become important, because you can have a situation where you say, okay, we are the big three, we can still garner all the resources available. But if you do that, the sport might not survive. So you need to be thinking holistically, looking at the entire sport, and within that, of course, the men's section and the women's section.
Absolutely. And we are going to wrap soon, but just before we do, the new normal, right? It's around the corner. We're really lucky that the Women's 2020 World Cup final happened on the day it did and not 5 days later. Great, very grateful for that. But now the new normal, what is it going to look like? England is going to come out and start training on the 22nd of June. Everybody's doing some kind of online training or the other. Everybody's sharpening their skills. But how important is it to get back on the field, to the gym? And Mel, what do you say? What is the new normal going to look like? What are the plans with Cricket Australia?
I don't have a crystal ball here, Mum. Sorry.
You didn't have it out?
Yeah. I think it's going to take a while to settle. I think because there's no playbook for this, is there? So, all eyes are going to be on England for this next little phase about how they manage, sort of biosecurity and little hubs and all those sorts of things, to see how they do that. That will, bits and pieces will be picked up by other countries. Some countries won't go through it at all, and so their players will just be training and getting ready to go overseas. So everyone is in such a different place. And I think, again, we've spoken about it a bit. I think this is the big time to say, we've got a bit of a blank canvas in a sense, and say, well, what didn't actually work back in the day, but was just entrenched in our system because it's been that way for 100 years. Let's get rid of it. Let's be brave enough to say it was never really being an advantage to the game. What are the things where we always really wanted to try and get in, but we couldn't because there's sort of all these roadblocks? Now we've maybe had the opportunity of doing that. And I think countries need to be brave enough to put their own unique flavour to their own backyard. But at the same point in time, I think you're right, Ayaz, is that we certainly do need to have a global look to the game as well in terms of men's cricket, women's cricket, right through to grassroots as well. So what does the new normal look like? I have no idea. I've skirted around that question beautifully, I think. But
you have. But what's really important is that yours is a strong voice. It's a strong voice in a place that it's really required, right? In the hallways of cricket or whatever, the annals of cricket all across the world. I think you're a voice, Melanie Jones, that is taken very seriously and rightfully so. And thank God you're there batting for women's cricket the way you are, and women's sport, not just cricket. So that's just absolutely amazing. Just
hopefully
to go back
a little bit better than I did for Australia, so I'll play a lot straighter. Stay away from the highlights.
Experience, right? So as far as the match is concerned, and I'd like to end on this exciting note and not the bird of doom note, but like Ayaz said, his fan moment was meeting Billie Jean King. I wasn't there, albeit I did see it on TV, and my pinnacle of watching it was the celebration with Katy Perry. I think the girls were so cool in their entire dance and their jig and everything, and men would have struggled to look half as decent as the women did, right? It is after all, it's a fact. But Harini, tell me, what was your takeaway moment? What was your fan moment? That one thing that you remember, and then we'll end with MJ with hers. So Harini.
Okay, I think my moment was when I was actually stepping out of the ground. This is, I think, post the match. So 45 minutes, we were sort of waiting to watch Katy Perry perform, and the Australian team was obviously on the stage, and it was fun. So when I was stepping out, I saw a father and a young daughter. She was about, 10 or 12? And the conversation was like, the daughter was actually thanking father, saying that, Dad, thanks for letting me be awake past my bedtime by about 2 or 3 hours. And the dad was just having a conversation, and he asked her, why do you say this? And she goes like, this is a moment that I'm going to cherish all my life, and it's given me memories that's going to stay with me forever. So that's the kind of impact that this match had, and that's the kind of belief that and the confidence that it gave to this player. So this story is my favorite moment, even though yes, a day prior to the match I met up with Billie Jean King. That was amazing, but in terms of just this whole story and this moment, I think it sort of was my favorite.
I think that's the beauty of live sport, right? You can bust every deadline imaginable. It happens in my home all the time. With live sport, no problem. Bust your deadline, watch what you want. I asked your moment to take away from the World Cup, apart from Billie Jean King.
Well, I think that the fact of my being there itself was for me the highlight of my trip to Australia. And thanks to Tourism Australia and Victoria Tourism, which made it possible, honestly, to go and watch that match. And while I did expect a grand show, I really didn't expect it to be so grand. And then, of course, meeting Billie Jean King was the icing on the cake.
And you have seen many iconic cricket matches across the board,
10 World Cups, ODI World Cups.
So that's 10 ODI World Cups. This one, not to put any kind of comparison, but give us that zoomed out perspective.
So I think what this showed, this event, was that women's cricket has come of age in terms of acceptance. When you've got 86,000 people, even if it has been lobbied for and propagated and promoted and very aggressively, but for so many people to come out in itself is a sure sign of the trajectory the sport could take, or women's cricket could take. And therefore, I think this is something that needs to be built up or built on. And not just in Australia, which has always been such a great sporting nation. Or India in pockets where you'll find, actually in India, you'll find great demand for women's cricket, not necessarily in the urban centers, but in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, because they'll come and watch the action. It needs to be spread globally. I think that's where the muscle for women's cricket will come in. It can't be in small pockets where, different cities in the world, but globally, the acceptance has to get stronger, whether it's in the West Indies or South Africa, especially Pakistan, Bangladesh, conservative societies. If they become strong and accept women's cricket, I think nothing can stop it.
Absolutely right. And we, the members of the media, have a huge role to play in that. And we have to continue to do that, right? To create that engagement, that awareness, and that muscle power, that support. And I'm going to leave just the last one from MJ, your parting shot, MJ, from the match.
Isn't it amazing? We've spoken about this game, and we actually haven't spoken about the game itself. Like, there's no moment of that V ball because of everything else that was going on around it. So I will say, look, the first ball, I was still down on the ground, leaving the pod from the pre-show with Fox, and I thought I just want to watch the first ball, and it was Deepti Sharma to Elisa Healy, and she created the full toss, and it went straight to mid wicket, but right over, just over the top of her. And I've got it on video because I was filming it, and all you can hear is me going, "Get over." And so for that moment, I was a fan. I was the person in the crowd just cheering on Australia. Yeah. We packed that aside and got back into my serious so the game itself, it was very one-sided. Finals often are, particularly when there's so much hype about it. So I was absolutely rapt for the professionalism in which Australia brought to that game. They just embraced it beautifully. And then to sort of the bookend that game was Harmanpreet Kaur at the coin toss. I said, "Where's your mum?" And she pointed up to the stand. It was the first time her mum had seen her play cricket. So big flight across, monster ground. First time she'd seen her daughter play was the Women's World Cup final. And then to bookend it, I was standing there with Belinda Clark as the Australian team lifted the trophy. And there's a photo of the two of us just from behind, just watching what was going on. And I can remember turning to her going, "Can you believe it?" And she went,
"Oh, wow."
So it was sort of those two bookends of the game for me.
That is just amazing. And I want to just clap out for that because fantastic. But that's the beauty of cricket, the beauty of sport, right? The story.
And by the way, I just want to say that Mel was celebrating. So next day was this happening party that Mel had in our local suburb of Footscray. And I don't want to tell more details about it, but yeah, Mel was, I think that we were like killing it.
What's coming up?
I'm calling you after the show. Harini, I'm going to call you after the show.
Yeah, we should. Offline. We'll take this offline.
All of us offline. We go get on a WhatsApp call after this. But there's something flashing on my screen. It says, coming up, Mel Jones's reaction from the ground. So I'm going to end the show.
I think that I'm actually lost for words. This crowd, this amazing sporting community that's got right behind this team right from the get-go. This team itself is one of the most professional, one of the most humble, one of the most awe-inspiring group of players I've ever come across. And that is one of the reasons why 86,000+ people came out to support them. They're absolutely outstanding.
Wow. I could feel your goosebumps, MJ.
I was a blubbering mess. It was ridiculous. So I've done well there to keep that together.
Not emotional, eh? You say? Not emotional?
Yeah, supposedly.
No, this has been fabulous, guys. Thank you so much. Hopefully the first chat of many. MJ, Harini, Ayaz, thank you so much. Just to sum it up, yes, women's cricket has come of age and we are all there to support it in whichever way we can as members of the media, as very important voices of cricket, and just as fans, the most important component of the game. So thank you very much, and see you soon. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Mandira.
Okay.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Mel. Bye.